Hello? Follow that? Follow that? Thank you, Kevin. So, and many of you won't have heard of me before, or you've heard of me, but you won't have heard from me before. Like you did a bit yesterday, but anyhow, I've got a bit longer to speak now. And I just want to tell you that it's just fantastic working with Kevin Courtney. He's just a great friend and colleague. And he has worked so hard to allow the amalgamation to take place so well. That's not scripted, but I just wanted to say that. So what I did want to say, and what is scripted, is that travel broadens the mind, they say, and I've been doing a little bit of travelling recently. I represented the National Education Union at the International Summit for the Teaching Profession in Finland. It's a unique summit in its 10th year. And education ministers are only allowed to attend that summit if they take a trade union leader with them. So, for the past 9 years, myself and Nick Gibb, we're like that, the schools minister, we've sat side by side at along with trade union leaders from 25 OECD countries discussing our respective education systems. Now, would it surprise you, conference, if I said that Nick and I have not agreed about very much? Indeed, we have strongly disagreed many, many times. Now, Nick believes that competition between schools raises standards. He keeps believing this despite all evidence to the contrary. What we know is that it's cooperation and collaboration between education professionals which improves education. Now, Nick, sadly, could not come to this year's summit in Finland because of pressing matters in Parliament. It's a pity that he could not make it because he would have learned a lot. We heard from Olli-Pekka Heineman, the Director General of the Finnish National Education Agency, and he spoke to the delegates about the Finnish education system and gave his views about why his country, Finland, consistently tops the PISA International Education League tables. And in his talk, he used one word repeatedly, and that word was trust. And he said, "We trust each other. We trust our institutions, parents trust schools." And he said, "Where you give trust, you get back trust." What a powerful statement of truth, and how sad it made me feel when I heard it. Because it made me think about our education system and our members working in it. Conference, our education system is built on a lack of trust. That's why it was so amazing to hear Jeremy Corbyn say to us, all of us in this hall, that Labour trusts teachers and support staff. Let me repeat his words. He said, "You are the professionals, you know your job, you know your students." And it was amazing to hear this because it is so far from where we are now under this government. Under this government, our members are under constant surveillance. They are obsessively monitored. They are policed by an inspection agency, Bousted, which lives up to the intention of its founding chief inspector, Chris Woodhead, who wanted Bousted to be a weapon of fear and terror to teachers. Too many of our schools are driven by fear. Too many of our schools are dogged by data, much of it inaccurate and useless, in that it gives no useful information beyond what you know already. Data which unfairly stacks the odds against schools doing the hardest work. Schools serving poor children, living in deprived areas, whose teachers and school leaders are routinely shamed by negative Ofsted judgments which utterly fail to recognise just how much difference their work has made to the poorest pupils' lives. Judgments which fail to recognise that it is these schools which are increasingly, as austerity bites deeper and deeper, the only functioning institution in the locality, providing food and clothes to children whose parents can't even afford these essentials. Let's be clear, conference. It is our dysfunctional and toxic accountability system which is poisoning our schools, the education professionals working in those schools, and our children. And at the centre of this dysfunctional and toxic school accountability system is Ofsted. Ofsted, more than anything else, creates mistrust in our schools. It creates divisions between leaders and teachers. And Ofsted drives teachers and school leaders from the profession. Did you know that 1 in 3 school leaders now leave their post within 3 years of being appointed? And schools in deprived areas find it almost impossible to appoint leaders because of the risk of the ever-threatening, career-ending, negative Ofsted judgment. So in too many schools, teachers and leaders struggle not only with the demands of the job, and teaching is a highly demanding job, they struggle also with the constant instability as colleagues come and go, trying to do their best, knowing that their best will never be judged good enough, and that however hard they work, late into the evenings on weekdays and at the weekend, it will never be enough. Teachers in the UK teach about the average number of work really kicks in is in the outer classroom work they do, which takes twice as much time as their teaching timetable. And this is not work done to improve teaching and learning. It is not work done to help teachers think more deeply about the curriculum, about their pupils, about their learning and how to assess else, so that they have proof that the teachers are doing their job. It is work done which makes teachers feel that they have no professional agency, no professional autonomy. It treats teachers as children. Professional adults, do you know, don't like to be treated as children. Teachers have not studied for at least 4 years at graduate level to be treated like children. They have other choices they can make, skills that they can utilise in other work, and so they leave the profession in droves. Now, contrast the condition of teachers in England with teachers in Finland. Far from being unable to meet its teacher training targets, as England has been unable to do for the past 5 years, the hardest profession to enter in Finland is primary school teaching, which shows that making teaching an attractive profession and keeping teachers in the profession is actually possible if you create the right conditions for the profession to flourish. Conference, Finland understands this truth. Finland abolished school inspections in 1991, and yet Finland consistently comes top in the top 3 education systems in the international comparisons and has done so for decades. Closer to home, NEU members in Northern Ireland have refused the inspectorate access to their classrooms for over 3 years. When the inspector in Northern Ireland walks into a classroom, students are told to open a textbook placed on their desk and to commence silent reading. And inspectors in Northern Ireland have been able only to form judgments on the school's safeguarding procedures. But Conference, there has been no decline in educational standards in Northern Ireland. Parents have not been demanding that inspections resume. They have trusted their teachers, and when Kevin and I made a recent visit to Northern Ireland, NEU teacher members told us that they had regained their sense of pride in their work based on their professional agency and their choice to focus on what is important to improve the teaching and their pupils' learning. And I salute our members in Northern Ireland for their brave action in keeping the inspectorate out of their schools. And Conference, that is why Ofsted has to go. Ofsted must be abolished. The Greens and the Liberals have pledged to abolish Ofsted, and I want Labour to make that pledge too and to put it in its manifesto. And when we say Ofsted has to go because it does its work so badly, we are not saying, please do not report that we are saying that schools should not be accountable to their pupils, to their parents, and to the public, and to the local communities, and to the nation. Schools must be held accountable, but in ways which are proportionate, focused, and intelligent. Schools must be held accountable in ways which build teacher and school leader professionalism and keep them in the profession, because no education system can succeed when it burns up teachers and leaders and throws them out. And there is another demonstration of trust in the Finnish system, which Olli-Pekka Heinemann talked about. He talked not only about trusting schools and trusting teachers, he talked about trusting pupils too. And he said, we don't want to be testing them all the time. We want them to support their own learning. Where you give trust, you also get back trust. Conference, you made a momentous decision on Monday to ballot the members to boycott SATs. And as I said to you yesterday, decisions made in the conference hall now need to be made real in the 20,925 primary schools in England where NEU members work. They need to understand why we have voted to boycott SATs, and they will need to be brought along with us. So conference, when we leave this hall, we've got to understand that our work is just beginning. We know that the most effective way to bring people to our point of view is to talk to them face to face. So we need to have a massively big conversation about why SATs are so damaging to our children. And you will all need to commit to being involved in that conversation in all the primary schools in your branches. It's an enormous task, but we are many, and together we can achieve great things. But our desire to reform our education system must not stop at primary education. Our ambitions must be wider. As Madeleine Holt said yesterday, we must reform secondary education as well. Because in secondary education in the UK, we are topping the international league tables in the wrong ways and doing the wrong things. Do you know the UK is a complete outlier when it comes to secondary curriculum and its assessment? And that we in England are hurtling forwards to a rosy past where academic subjects are all that matters, where there is an implicit belief that it is good for young people to fail throughout their school life with a sense that this is somehow good for their character. We know that the secondary curriculum is narrowing as schools face impossible funding decisions, so art and music and drama and design technology and so much more is being lost from the curriculum. We know that GCSEs and A-levels are too packed with content, so that in covering everything, too much is skimmed over, without the time to really foster in our pupils a deep understanding of what they are learning. We know that the return to timed linear exams at GCSE and A-level leaves pupils suffering under a welter of practice paper and mock exams. And do you remember the promise made by Michael Gove that taking away coursework and practical learning would lead to more teaching time? Well, that hasn't happened, has it? We know that students in secondary schools are spending their time in lessons writing, and that speaking and listening, making and doing is becoming too much of a rarity. But did you know that we are doing this just at the same time as other high-performing education nations are taking a different path? Countries like Singapore, which has acknowledged that decades of high-stake testing towards high-stake exams has resulted in stratospheric levels of student stress and unhappiness. They recognise they have students who are compliant and complicit, with high levels of academic achievement, but who leave schools without the essential skills that they need in their adult lives in the 21st century. So in Singapore, there is a new education goal to develop the whole person and to promote the personal attributes of self-awareness, self-management, self-assessment, and responsible decision-making. And Singapore is not alone in refocusing the goals of its education system beyond narrow academic curricula and high-stakes testing. So too are New Zealand, Japan, Estonia, and the Canadian provinces of Alberta and Ontario. Applied knowledge, interdisciplinary knowledge, skills development, this is where successful education systems are heading. And where does this leave us in the United Kingdom? Well, we are top of the memorisation league table, coming only behind Uruguay and Ireland for the prevalence of rote learning in our classrooms. And the problem with this? Well, as the OECD international evidence base proves, rote learning is fine for simple basic knowledge, but becomes less and less effective as a learning and teaching strategy the more complex and high level the learning needs to be. So conference, we must now aim our sights at reforming our secondary education system so that we do not top the international league table of rote learning. And we must recreate it so that our students are expert orators, highly skilled in their reasoning abilities, their creative abilities, and their willingness to cooperate with one another and to work well together. Because these are the skills that employers say they want and need, and these are the skills which are needed for successful lives in a century where there will be few, if any, jobs for life, because technology is moving so rapidly and in ways that we can barely envisage. So conference, we are nothing if not ambitious. We want radical reform of our education system. We want good work for all NEU members, for support staff, for teachers, for lecturers and for leaders. We want to be treated as professionals. We want to be trusted. Give us trust, hold us properly accountable, and see how we and our pupils will fly. We have such talent in the NEU and such dedicated activists. Emma Parker from Durham, who last year organised a national conference on SEND, attended by over 300 delegates, and she's doing it again this year. And Jess Edwards, who only last month organised a Celebrating Education conference with teachers, support staff and lecturers and leaders, and they got together to talk about the real issues that matter to them. Over 500 delegates working all Saturday to improve the lives and the learning of their pupils. I salute all NEU members, support staff, teachers, lecturers and leaders who work in schools and colleges throughout the UK and who really make a difference to children and young people's lives, away from the sound and fury, in their schools and classrooms, day in, day out, doing the job, doing the best they can. I believe that the NEU has done great things. I believe that we will go on to even greater things. And with my friend Kevin, together, as Joint General Secretaries, we are proud to serve you.